He's in there laughing, and I'm in there going, Mike, you're nuts. You're crazy. What are you doing up there?
I knocked on the window, right? And he waved at me and he said, hello, I can't believe it! He waved at me!
There are performers who put on a show. And then there was Michael Jackson, who turned every single moment he was near his fans into something nobody in that crowd was ever going to forget for the rest of their lives. It was not just the concerts. It was not just the rehearsed routines and the carefully planned staging. It was the unexpected moments. The moments where something happened that nobody in that arena, nobody watching on television, and sometimes not even the people working the event had seen coming. Those are the moments that have been replayed and shared and talked about for decades. Michael Jackson had a very specific kind of relationship with his fans. He understood, perhaps better than any other performer of his era, that the moment between an artist and the person watching them is not just a transaction. It is something real, something that can become a memory so vivid that a person carries it for the rest of their life. He treated those moments with the same care and the same intentionality that he brought to every note he recorded in the studio. This is the story of the times Michael Jackson surprised his fans in ways nobody saw coming, and why those moments still matter today. The moment MJ kept performing while a fan climbed a crane. The year was 1996. Michael Jackson was in Seoul, South Korea, in the middle of his high-story world tour. He was performing Earth Song, elevated above the stage on a boom lift, moving through the air while tens of thousands of people watched from below. And then something happened that nobody in that stadium had anticipated. A fan climbed up the crane of the lift to reach him. Not toward the stage, not toward the barricades, up the actual crane mechanism, high above the ground, just to get close to Michael Jackson for one moment. What Michael Jackson did next is what every person who has ever seen this footage remembers. He did not stop. He did not panic. He did not signal to security or break the performance or acknowledge in any visible way that something completely unplanned was happening feet from him while he was suspended in the air. He kept singing. He kept performing. Every note landed exactly where it was supposed to land. The fan struck poses in the air alongside him, arms raised, living what was clearly the most extraordinary moment of his entire life, before security finally reached them as the lift descended back toward the stage and pulled the fan away. The comments on resurfaced footage of this moment, decades later, say everything that needs to be said. People wrote that they loved how he knew he had this effect on people and just kept going, that he was a true artist, that his professionalism in that moment was almost superhuman. One person admitted they probably would have done the same thing to get that close to him. He surprised that fan by simply being exactly who he was, at full intensity. Even when the situation around him had gone completely off script, the moments he brought fans into the performance itself. One of the most consistent and most documented ways Michael Jackson surprised his fans was by reaching into the audience and bringing someone directly into the performance itself, not as a gimmick, not as a scripted routine where a pre-selected plant in the crowd pretends to be surprised. He would genuinely pull someone from the thousands of people watching and make them part of the show. During performances of You Are Not Alone, he brought fans on stage and sang directly to them, holding their hands, maintaining eye contact, treating a person who had arrived as one of 50,000 audience members as if they were the only person in the room. The footage of those fans in those moments is something that is almost impossible to watch without feeling the weight of what they were experiencing. The reactions were always the same: shock first, then tears, then a kind of overwhelmed joy that has no clean description. These were people who had saved money for concert tickets, who had waited in lines, who had traveled sometimes hundreds of miles to be in that building, and then suddenly they were not watching Michael Jackson. They were standing next to him, part of the show, while 50,000 people watched them both. Some of them could barely stand. Some of them had to be steadied by security as they walked on stage, because their legs had stopped working, the way legs are supposed to work. Every single one of them walked off that stage, carrying a story they would tell for the rest of their lives, and which their children and grandchildren would eventually not believe. What made these moments different from similar things other performers have done is that they never felt mechanical or rehearsed. They felt like Michael Jackson genuinely saw the person in front of him, not a fan, not an audience member filling a seat, a person, and he responded to that person accordingly. Michael Jackson's relationship with the public was complicated by the sheer scale of his fame. Going anywhere ordinary, a shop, a restaurant, a street, was an event in itself. But there were moments, documented and remembered by the people who witnessed them, where he appeared in places and in ways that nobody expected, and the reactions those appearances produced were unlike anything most people have ever witnessed in a public setting. Stories from former staff and people who accompanied him describe moments where he would step out of a vehicle or appear around a corner in a location where fans had gathered without any official announcement, and the response would build from one person recognizing him to an immediate, overwhelming wave of sound and movement that took over the entire space. One specific pattern that people who knew him describe is his awareness of fans waiting outside hotels and venues, sometimes for hours or days, in the hope of catching a glimpse of him. On multiple documented occasions, rather than simply using a back exit or a private entrance the way most celebrities at that level of fame would, he chose to go out front, to acknowledge the people who had been standing there, to give them the moment they had been waiting for. Those who were present for those moments described the response as something they had never seen replicated by any other public figure. It was not simply excitement. It was something closer to disbelief made physical. People who had been waiting calmly, who had been holding signs and quietly hoping, suddenly found themselves in direct proximity to the person they had come to see, and the reality of that was almost too much for many of them to process in real time. Former security staff who worked with Michael Jackson across different tours and different countries have described these unplanned public appearances as some of the most genuinely moving things they ever witnessed in their careers, not because of the fame involved, but because of the specific quality of joy that appeared on people's faces in those moments. They described it as something different from the normal excitement of seeing a celebrity. It was more personal than that, more significant. The reason the clips of Michael Jackson surprising his fans have stayed in circulation for decades, long after most concert footage from that era has been forgotten, is not simply because he was famous. It is because of what those moments actually meant to the people experiencing them. Michael Jackson occupied a specific and almost impossible to explain place in the emotional lives of millions of people around the world. He was not simply an artist they listened to. For a very large number of his fans, his music had been present during some of the most significant moments of their lives. Songs that played during a first dance, or during a difficult period, or during childhood years that they now looked back on with nostalgia. The music was woven into their personal history in a way that made the person who had made it feel genuinely close, even to people who had never been in the same room as him. When those people were then suddenly in the same room as him, when he reached into the crowd and made one of them part of the show, or when he appeared somewhere unexpected, and the distance between the music and the man collapsed entirely for one specific person in one specific moment, the emotional response was not proportional to what had technically happened. Technically, a celebrity had appeared in public or invited a fan on stage. What it felt like to the people it happened to was something considerably larger than that. It felt like the most important and most unexpected thing that had ever happened to them. And Michael Jackson, who understood this better than anyone, treated it accordingly every time. The thing about Michael Jackson's relationship with his fans that made it genuinely unlike any other artist's relationship with any other audience is how seriously he took it. He did not see the reaction he produced as background noise to his career. He saw it as something real, as a connection between what he had made and the people it had reached. And he treated the moments where that connection became physical, where a fan was suddenly in his actual presence rather than just listening to his music, with a level of care and intentionality that most performers never bring to those situations at all. The Crane fan in Seoul was not just a funny clip. It was a person who had been so moved by what Michael Jackson represented to them that they had climbed a piece of construction equipment in the middle of a concert to get close to him. The fans pulled on stage during You Are Not Alone were not just audience members selected for a bit. They were people carrying years of personal history connected to that music, placed suddenly in the middle of the show by the person who had made it. Every one of these moments was a surprise. None of them were scripted or planned in advance. But they all reflected the same truth about Michael Jackson and the relationship he built with the people who loved his work. He understood that the fans were not just spectators. They were the whole reason any of it mattered. Which of these moments hit you the hardest? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications because there is still so much more of this story worth telling.